Welcome back, viewers. Thank you so much for tuning into my channel. My name is Patrick Tawaya Matope, and on this channel, I do deliver content around social work or on social work, especially practice with children and families, really. This is something which I've been doing for the past 18 years, so that's something which I know I'm able to share information according to my own experiences or from information shared with friends and colleagues and all that. So in today's topic, I'm going to be talking to you about the 10 tips from my own experience on how you can conduct an effective Section 47 inquiry according to the Children's Act of 1989. So these 10 tips are not exhaustive. I'm not going to be sitting here and claiming that I'm a guru when it comes to these things. But remember, these are nuggets from my own experiences and from my own experience of managing teams and also my experience of being on the front line as well. So it's really, really important to make sure that I clear that out. I put that disclaimer from the beginning. If there's anything that I would have left in this video, please put your comments in the chat below, and I'll be able to review that information and possibly consider in future videos and stuff like that. Remember, carrying out Section 47 inquiry is a mandate which is there from the Children's Act. We are mandated to be carrying out what we would call Section 47 inquiries as espoused in the Children's Act of 1989. So it's really important. It's a really important step that we do take when it comes to safeguarding children. If we believe that the child has suffered or is likely to suffer significant harm of risk, really. So the first tip that I'm going to be talking about which is really, really important, is to understand the criteria. What do I mean by that? You need to be clear about the circumstances that trigger what we would call a Section 47 inquiry. That's tip number one. Very, very important. You need to understand the circumstances that may trigger an inquiry under the Children's Act of 1999, an inquiry under Section 47 of the Children's Act of 1999. So when you're in a strategy meeting and discussions are being held, you need to be very attentive and listen to all the reports which are being given, so that you'll be able to actually make a recommendation on whether threshold of significant harm has been met with for that particular child. Has the child suffered risk? Or is the child likely to suffer risk? Or is the child likely to continue to suffer, risk of significant harm? That's really, really important. So remember, Section 47 is triggered when there is a reasonable suspicion or there is a reasonable cause to suspect that a child is suffering or has suffered significant harm or is likely to suffer significant harm. That's really, really important. Point number one. Moving on then, point number two is immediate response. What do I mean by immediate response? Remember, a child where threshold has been met needs to be seen within 24 hours. 24 hours. Unless if it is an issue around sexual abuse, but the child is in a safe space or stuff like that. But remember, a child will need to be seen within 24 hours. However, there are some instances where a child has to be seen immediately after the meeting because of the circumstances presenting for that particular child. Remember, we need to act promptly and within guidelines and within timescales upon receiving information that would have been shared by the professionals in the strategy meeting, especially information which is suggesting that the child may still be in danger, or there is a likelihood that the child will continue to suffer significant harm. Remember, delay in acting promptly or delay in responding to these concerns may further put the child at risk. Point number two, that's really, really important. Point number three, which is also important, is multi-agency collaboration. Remember, the decision to determine whether the threshold has been met is done in a multi-agent setup, which is in a strategy meeting where all agencies do attend. That's health, education, social care, as well as other, health, education, police, and social care, and other agencies who need to be attending. So you need to be working closely with those agencies throughout your Section 47 inquiry. It doesn't necessarily mean because you've had a strat, you've agreed, now you go out, whether it's a joint or a single with the police, now you go out and everything else you handle it on your own. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Or even if it means that the decision of the multi-agents professionals is that single agent section 47 to be progressed, it doesn't necessarily mean that you stop engaging with those agencies in terms of getting further information in your inquiry. Remember, it's a multi-agency collaboration, so you need to work closely with other agencies such as the police. I mentioned about police, health, I mentioned about education, making sure that sharing information will help you to come up with a comprehensive view of that child's situation, and hence be able to actually risk assess and actually put a safety plan in place which is agreed by all professionals. And in that way you can actually come up with a robust section 47 inquiry. Even your write-ups will actually be reflective of the efforts that you have put in terms of making sure that you have collaborated in a multi-agency manner. Point number 4, child-centered approach. Remember, it's all about the child, nothing else. It's all about the child. So you need to be child-centered. Ensure that the child's welfare is paramount in your inquiry, and make sure that you have evidenced the voice of the child in your inquiry. You need to be listening attentively to what the child is telling you, and you need to take their views, wishes, and feelings into account when you are doing your inquiry. I'm not going to emphasize on that. I think as practitioners or as parents, we know how important it is for that inquiry to be child-centered. Point number 5, parental involvement. It's really, really important. You need to be engaging the parents. Remember, it might come to a point where we've agreed that threshold is met, or a CP medical. For those who are not social workers, a CP medical just basically means child protection medical may need to be done because we suspect that the child has got a mark or an injury which is indicative of the harm that they've suffered. Hence, a child protection medical will need to be done by our colleagues from health to determine to the extent of that injury or the extent of the harm the child has suffered. So remember, parental engagement is really important because you would want these parents to be the one accompanying this child to the center where you are taking this child for a CP medical to be done. So remember, it's important for you to engage the family. It's important for you to engage the parents, and also making sure that their views are also incorporated in your write-ups. It may not necessarily be the birth parents, but sometimes caregivers. Remember, it could be a child who is in care, whom a Section 47 inquiry is being done on. So remember, you need to engage not only the parents, but also caregivers, unless doing so may place the child at further risk of significant harm. I think that's very, very clear. Remember, they need to understand, and they should understand and appreciate the concerns of the local authority of the professionals, and they should understand the process that is being done in carrying out a Section 47 inquiry. I'm going to move on now to point number 6, which is you need a clear plan of what's going to be happening. So remember, even if the decision has been made, but between whether it's going to be joined between police and social care, remember, you still need to have a plan as to when you go there, who's going to say what, who's going to do what, who's going to be leading, and all that, and all those kind of things. Not necessarily leading, but remember, if it's a joint, it's a joint. Both health and both social care and the police will need to be there, but we still need to have a clear plan for the inquiry, outlining who will do what, by when, and this should also include any need for medical assessments or immediate protective action to be taken. Remember, all the decisions needs to be taken in that multi-agents, setup. Obviously, there will be some decisions that can be done outside that meeting, but it's important to make sure that you've got a clear plan of what's going to be happening. Point number 7 is to make sure that you come up with a thorough inquiry, thorough assessment. You conduct a thorough inquiry or a thorough assessment of the child's needs, the risks that may be posed to that particular child, or if there are further risks, the parent's capacity to actually manage those needs or those risks, or to actually engage with support services so that those risks are actually minimized or actually reduced. You also need to make sure that you have included the family and environmental factors. Remember the assessment triangle. You can still use that in your inquiry as well, which is really, really important. Point number 8 is to make sure that in everything you do, you minimize distress on the child. Minimize distress on the child. When you are carrying out your inquiries, it's about assessing and seeing whether, if that mark is actually fading and the parents are actually saying, oh yes, we know we have done it, we are really sorry about what has happened, do you really need to take that child through a CP medical? It's a decision that you need to have a conversation with your line manager or a senior prac. But remember, we need to carry out these inquiries in a sensitive manner which minimizes distress to the children who are involved or to the family. And we need to be respectful to that particular family, being mindful of their cultural and religious practices as well. However, cultural and religious practices shouldn't override the risk that the child is suffering, in as much as we need to be taking them into account. But remember, they shouldn't override the risks that the child is actually suffering. Because remember, FGM, it's a cultural practice in some other cultures, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it should be justified. Point number 9, record keeping. This is really, really important. Everything that happens, you need to make sure that your case notes are up to date. Your record keeping is perfect and it's up to date. Making sure that you keep a detailed and accurate record and up to date of all the findings that you have done, so that if anything kicks off out of hours, you've got a safe plan in place. At least the colleagues from EDT will be able to tell what the safe plan is, what is the go-to plan when anything kicks off out of hours, really. So you need to make sure that the recordings actually reflect the work that you've done already. It actually reflects what has been done on that particular case and what needs to be done, if anything happens, or what could be, what needs to be looked into in terms of the future inquiries. Point number 10, which is the last of the tips I'm going to give today in this video, is around reviewing and reflection. Remember, you have got some days to actually complete your Section 47 inquiry. So you need to make sure that, remember, cases are always dynamic, things do change. So be somebody who is able to reflect, be somebody who is able to review the information that you have heard, so that you are able to actually give a proper recommendation and actually come up with an outcome, whether the child has suffered or is continuing to suffer significant harm, or the outcome could be the child has suffered harm, but it doesn't necessarily look like the child will continue to suffer significant harm, or the outcome might actually be concerns are actually not substantiated. So it all depends. So remember, you need to be able to review and reflect. Remember, these tips which I've given now are not exhaustive. I've already mentioned from the beginning. And the other disclaimer I'm going to make is that the tips I've given are only designed to ensure that your inquiry is thorough, fair, and focused on the safety and well-being of the child. But remember, you need to have a conversation with your superiors or your line manager or your senior prac if you're not clear on anything. But these are just tips which I think might be helpful for somebody out there. With those few words, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe and hit that notification bell so that when I post, you'll be the first person to know. I really appreciate you watching up until the end. Thank you so much.